Okay, so I'd like to welcome to week 4 of CS220, which is data management and security. So we're following our syllabus here. We're now coming. We did our exam 1 last week. Um, we're talking this week. We're going to be looking at the content of talking about hash algorithms and cryptography. All right. So these are different techniques that the database management system can and will use to protect data from a security perspective, be able to encrypt data so that if you know only people with the key with a specific key would be able to get access to it. All right. So so those are the two lectures we're going to be. I want you to take a look at this week. The other thing I want to do this week, though, is walk through lab exercise 1. All right, so a little bit of a background. When we did this class back in the fall, this was we met in person. All right, so basically everybody was coming in, and a number of the lab exercises we had the opportunity to do in class. All right. Obviously, with an online class, we're not going to have that. So I've actually gone back and I've reworked um, the lab exercises. I broke them down into 3 exercises. Um, and they kind of follow along. If you look at kind of what a database, the work we do with a database. Um, First thing we do is we focus on defining the database and all of the data, define all the tables that are in it. All right. Um, Second thing we do, once we've created all the tables, the database and all the tables, we go back and we add all of the data. We load data into the database. All right. And then once we have loaded the database, the third thing we do is access data and ask queries, develop queries, and get results back. All right. So that's basically what our 3. We're going to have 3 lab exercises, and that's how that's going to follow. All right. So I want to walk through lab exercise 1. All right. So to give you a heads up, this is where we're going to need the MySQL to be installed on your machine. So hopefully you've got that done. Um, if you don't have it, becomes a very short flight. So we need to have this done no matter what. All right. And we have the video. There's a video out there that will step you through that. I'm working on a Macintosh. All right. So my interfaces look probably a little bit different, but it should be, pretty close. All right. For processing. All right. So what, actually what I'll do is I'm going to exit this. So I'm going to come in. So what we do is the way MySQL works is there's the database management system, which runs as a bunch of processes on the computer itself. All right, so we start up the machine, we start up the database system, and there's a couple processes that are running, waiting for us to work with. Okay, so that's all back end stuff. That's stuff you don't see. The stuff we actually work with is what we call the workbench, this MySQL workbench, which is simply another program that's designed to sit between us and the back end database management system that's going to do all this work. All right, so this is a very important program here. All right. So this is the workbench. All right. So what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is do a connection to the database. All right. So we should be able to do a connection. You should see, if you go to a connection, you'll see this connect to database, and it'll pull up this screen right here, connect to database. One of the things to remember about this, you have to do whatever the password, the username and password. So the host name will be localhost because it's on your local machine. The port number will be 3306. It's basically the communication port that we're going to be talking, that's reserved to talk to MySQL. All right. We need a username, all right, which will be root, and then the password, whatever password you had entered into when you set up the database, when you install the database. All right, so one of the things to be careful about with this is if you lose the password, you can't get into the database, and then basically what you have to do is deinstall. The easiest thing to do, there's mechanisms to which you'll be able to reset the password, but for our purposes, to make things simple, if you forget the password, what you'll want to do is deinstall MySQL and then reinstall MySQL. All right, but I've got this set up right now, so I have a system running, or a MySQL running, on my machine using port 3306. All right, so I'm going to do an OK, and it's going to take me to a screen that looks like this. All right, so this is really the working screen that we're going to be using. So we're going to be using this graphical, as we call it, the graphical user interface for the workbench. So it's a tool. Basically, it's a software tool that lets us send commands to the DBMS, have them executed, have it will execute on our behalf, and then send us results back. Okay. So what we're working with here is, let's go out here. Now, the lab exercise itself is actually way down here. So go all the way down below all of our topics. We will have this section here in the MySQL documentation. All right. And what I've got here is something called Lab Exercise 1. And so that's really that's the instructions, and basically it's a Word document. So it will download the Word document onto your machine. And it will look something like this, or it should look exactly like this, right? So this is Lab Exercise 1. So Lab Exercise 1, the things we're going to be focused on is creating the database and then creating all the tables. So if you look at this document here, all right, what I have is step 1, we want to create the MySQL database named sales, and then use the database to define all these associated tables. And then we have a command here. You see a command, create database sales, semicolon, and then use sales, semicolon. All right. This is the commands we're going to want to enter. So the best way to do this, the easiest way to do this, would be to just cut and paste. So just do a copy. We go to the workbench, and we will paste that into our table here, basically into this command string. So it now says create database sales, use sales. So these are the commands we're going to send to the DBMS and say, okay, we want to create a database called sales. Because as of right now, there is no database. There is no sales database. We're going to be building this. That's part of what this exercise is. So if we click this, if we take a look right here, this looks like I guess a lightning bolt up top. This is execute. So I'm going to click that, execute the script. And what it did is, we come down here, we have our 2 commands down here. Create database, and you got a green arrow. And then we also have below it, this will actually, I think this will pull up, kind of play around with getting this, adjusting the size of the screens. I think this will come up as well. Yeah, okay. Okay. Use sales. So what it'll do is when you execute the commands up here, it will tell you what it did, what the response is, and kind of what its duration is. All right, so you see, very fast. All right. So what happens is we create the database, and then we use the database. All right. So let's go back and look at our lab exercise. That's really the first step. We want to create the database, and then we're going to use the database. All right, so that's step 1. So let's go to step 2. So step 2 is we're going to create all these tables. So we've got a bunch of tables that we're going to create. We've defined, we've gone through, the assumption is we've gone back, we've designed all this stuff up. So we've gone through all this exercises of, we've, have analyzed the data, we've gone through the analysis process, we've run it through different normal forms. So this is our designed database. So the database is out here. So I have another, basically what I have is a script for each one of these. So the first thing we're going to create is an address table. So as you can see, these are the definitions of the table, of what the fields are in this table. If I come down here, I have a city table. So I have the address table. I have a city table, contains a list of cities. I have a country table. I have a customer table. I have an inventory table, an order table, a payment table, a staff table, a store table. And that's it. So there's 10 actually. But we create the database, and then there's 9 tables that make up this design. So this is a pretty, not super duper complicated, but fairly straightforward, database definition for stores and sales and orders and things like that. So this is something, you see this, if you go into Amazon and take a look at the databases they have there, they probably have something not exactly like this, but you'll recognize things that are some familiarity with it. All right. So let's go back up. So we've created our database sales. Let's do our create table. So we'll do the first one. We'll do do the first couple and kind of walk through it. All right. So so what I've defined here is these are the SQL commands that we use to create this table. All right. So we say use sales. So you always want to define what database you're going against, because a database management system could actually have many databases running. All right. So you have to tell it specifically, okay, of the 30 databases, use the sales database. That's always, we enter those command. And then we have a command, create table. So this is an SQL command, create table address. And then we have a bunch of stuff in parens. All right, so we have an address ID, an address to district, city ID, postal code, phone number, last update time, and then the primary key. Oh, excuse me. These are the fields, and then we have another command here that says primary key. So what this will say the address ID, which is this field right here, is the primary key. So that's a reserve. The term primary key those are reserved words in SQL. Right, so this will define, when we execute this will create a table based upon what all of these parameters are, all these different fields, and the parameters associated with. So what we're saying is the address field is going to be 50 characters long, and it's not null, so it needs to have something in it. Right, so that's the rule associated with that. Address 2 is also 50 characters long, but we don't necessarily have to have that. If we have a second address, or if we have a second address line, we can put it there. But if we don't have it, it's not required. But we do have to have an address. All right, and so on and so forth down the line here. So it's, and the last thing is a timestamp. We'll see additional parameters on that. What timestamp is designed to do is it's a field that it's designed so when the record gets installed or changed, or inserted or changed, it'll put the time and date stamp of when that occurs. Right, we'll take it from the system. So basically, you can go back and look at this stuff and say, okay, when was this thing updated? When was this? When was the data in this particular record added or modified? All right. So this is this is for create table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a cut and paste again. So I'm going to cut this whole use sales from use sales down to the definition of the primary key. Do Control C on the bind. I'm going to go back to the workbench, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to put this, I'm going to paste this right exactly, right below what I had done before. So I've got to use sales again. So it kind of that's probably redundant because we're already in the sales database. But in case you wanted to do something out of you always have to make sure you're in the sales database. So I always like to put that in there as a starting point, right? And you see now this is now root. You see this little icon right here. You can shrink that up to a create table, command, and then these are all the parameters. The parameters are all within this. All right. So if I do, what I can do is I can highlight all this and click execute within the selection. So if I don't select anything, it'll do everything again. So it'll try to create the database a second time, and we would have a problem. All right. But I'm going to collect it. I'm going to now execute everything that's highlighted. Execute that. So I got there's two warnings on it. Let's see if it created it. Let's see. Okay, so I think I've sorted out what was happening here. Give me a second. One of the things that happens is I created the database and the sales. I said, in use sales. That's successfully executed, all right? But we didn't see it, but the schemas, the definition, basically schema is the definition of the objects. All the tables and everything associated, with the database is stored within the schema. All right. So when I executed this create database sales, all right, I had to refresh this screen here, the schema. All right. So that actually gets done by clicking this, the two arrows here, which will do a refresh of it. All right. So if I click the sales, if I click my sales schema, and I look at the tables, I have the address table. So the address table wasn't so there's a warning on it, so it wasn't fatal. It's not red. Right? There's a warning. There's a warning. It's simply a warning, not a fatal error. All right. So we have successfully created the address table. All right. Let's go to another table. All right. So this is the city table. So the same exercise here, same process. Copy it. Control C. Go back to our workbench. We'll put it right here below the other one. And we will just simply highlight it and we will execute it. Got an error, got a warning once again, 2 warnings. All right. And if we do a refresh of the schema, what you'll see now is now we have the city. And we look at the columns. This is, and we can look at the details. So this is a this screen right here, the schema tab, as it were, gives us a list of all of the, this is what the database is. That's what this icon stands for, and these everything inside of it. So we get things. We're primarily working with tables, all right, but there's things we can add like views, which are basically kind of a definition. It enables us to restructure tables in such a way to optimize our access to it. Stored procedures or code we can run. Functions are provided capabilities that we can add into to be automatically executed within the table. So this is all. So our focus right now is really on this, just the creation of the tables. All right, so I've created 2. Let's do another 1 or 2 here just to kind of give you the flavor of it. All right, we'll do country. Execute it. So I now have a country table. All right, so basically what this first exercise is going through. So all the tables are out here. All the tables are defined out here in the lab exercise. So what we want to do is go through all 10 of these, create the table, create the database, come through here and then create all of the tables. All right. And then what I want to get is, once you've done that, the best way to do this would be, kind of see what we've done is, you can come out here to the SQL workbench, just do the refresh of the schema. All right. And kind of shrink these up if you don't need those. But just give me a screenshot of the schemas here, basically, of the sales and the tables. So at the end, what we should have is we should have 9, 1 database, 1 sales database, and 9 individual tables. All right. So that's our exercise 1. That's our first step in this. All right. What we'll do with next week, our next exercise will be to then load all of the data into these tables. And then the third one will be using the data that's in those tables. Okay? Hopefully that's, pretty straightforward. I guess the one thing is, trying to get familiarized with some of trying to keep this simple so we don't get all turned around. But basically, we're going to be using, creating this query using a query, which will have all of these data definition. These are all what we call, when we talked about DDL, different data definition languages, or language within SQL. That's what this is. That's what data definition is. So, creating a database, creating tables. All right. So all that's out here. So get a screenshot. If you can get a screenshot, create a screenshot of the list of the tables, and then just submit that onto the our Moodle site. So this is our, I believe that is in. It's down here. Yep, here we go. So these three, so down here below the lab exercise, all right, this is the lab assignment submission. All right, so just basically get a screenshot of the schema after you've created all the tables, do a cut and paste into a Word document, submit the Word document on the site here. All right, so I think that's it for now. Said, if you have problems getting into, I'm expecting you to probably, this might be a little, some of the stuff gets tricky, especially with the security with SQL, with MySQL, and making sure you can log into the server and then connect to it. So as questions, just reach out to me and we'll kind of walk through this. We're taking it one piece at a time. All right. So that's about it for this. Okay. So any problems with this, give me a yell, and we'll continue to move forward. All right. All right. Talk to you a bit. Bye now.